Hello, Amanda. Welcome to the Women Awaken podcast.
Hi, Whitney. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very excited to be here today.
Yeah, me too. Me too. On this beautiful Friday, we're
Definitely.
reaching the end of April and we're coming into eclipse season starting tomorrow.
Yeah.
I
haven't felt any wonky energy yet. So I'm staying in my lane right now.
Well, a little bit, because we did plan to have this on Tuesday, and the energy begins, like, it doesn't just like drop in the day that the eclipse is, which is tomorrow. Tomorrow we have the new moon and the eclipse in Taurus. But on Tuesday we were kind of like, we got in front of the camera and we're like, I don't know if we want to do this right now.
Oh, I was a mess. I will be fully open about it. I went through the last like handful of weeks. It was like really this heavy in my emotional body, just releasing a lot around money stuff, self-worth, like kind of these consumerism templates, things like that. And then on the day we got in front of each other, it was like my physical body was like the cells in my physical body were trying to catch up. And I just felt like I had like knives. I felt like contractions. I've never had children, but I'm sure it's way worse than that, but it was extremely painful. So I appreciate, I have energy today. I'm so glad we could reschedule.
Yeah, you're pregnant and birthing some emotional
something like that, releasing through my womb. I don't know.
Yeah,
never know fully.
Yeah, well, I mean, the womb is a powerful place. And there's, that's where, and that's our sacral, right? So it's where when we're dealing with things that are based on, sort of our fundamental understandings of things, the way that things sort of work and orchestrate, right? And so you said you were kind of thinking about your finances and those sort of, sort of I would call them pentacles from the tarot, but those sort of grounding things, it's kind of where things get worked out is in your sacral. So it makes sense that it was kind of having some movement around there.
Yeah. And I could feel the energy moving, and it felt like it was a combination of this really deeply rooted identity that I had carried on for so long. And I'm so grateful to be free of it, because I feel like a different person as I sit here today. But sometimes those periods where we're in that transition and we're in like that death and that rebirth, it can be very dismantling. So I was definitely in the work. I was in the density in the last handful of weeks, but definitely lightened up, feels much lighter. So.
Oh, good. Oh, good. So you took a little step, a little leap up.
Yep.
It's a long process. I keep telling my friends that I keep asking, like, am I dead yet? Like, cause it's like the death process, right? It's like transformation. It's like, aren't I dead? Like, am I not a new person yet? Because it's so many levels of changes and transformation. And I get that you're always changing, but it's a pretty like sort of a acute period when you're really going through like a bigger spiritual awakening or transformation. And I feel like mine's been going on for a while, but I think when we first spoke, you said that your sort of dark night of the soul lasted for quite a while.
It's been cycles of it. So It's been layers, cycles. So the first one's about 8 or so years ago. Mm-hmm. And that was a catalyst, was a very painful breakup. And that was several weeks of me hiding in my home. And I didn't know what was happening. I was like, because it was that thing that I couldn't escape. I had been able to remove myself from those and fill it with other things up until that point. And this time it was like, the universe is like, nope, not happening.
You got to look at this. You got to see it. You can't hide away. Go into your shell.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And so I had probably the most painful one, I will say, last year. It was August, September, and it went up and through January. So it was a roller coaster for sure. I wouldn't have it any other way, but it was definitely just, again, it was like the emotional purges, the identity releases, the physical body. I have a theory that, we have these spiritual insights and we have these things that come through and we have the integration at that level, but then the physical body sometimes hasn't quite caught up. And so sometimes it's like a lagging behind a little bit. And so I've experienced like those, where I have those insights and choices, and then I have the emotional release and the integration at like that mental, emotional level. And then it transitions like to the physical level after that. So at least that's just been my experience.
Yes. And thank you for speaking to that, because one, I think that it's so important for people to talk more about these spiritual, we can call it awakenings, transformation, shifting, because really it's just energy. If people want to look at it that way, more a science perspective, we know that our cells change every 7 years or so. We're basically completely different beings, like as far as our cellular structure. And so everybody experiences this, but we don't always talk about it. And we always want to kind of assign physical things to like some sort of illness or something else. So I think it's wonderful the more people talk to how this can be energy shifts and energy and emotional shifts in being expressed physically in a physical form.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely. Because it's so tied together. And
Yes.
a lot of the work I do is multifaceted and working with the physical body, because it's just, we can call it dis-ease. It's just these low vibrational frequencies that have not fully been expressed, that, it probably more often than not, it's like that time when you were little, when it wasn't safe, you didn't know how to express it, or it wasn't safe to express a certain emotion. And so the path of least resistance at that time was to maybe create the story around it, or to hold that emotion in, because maybe if you express that emotion, there would have been abuse, or who knows, there's so many different things that may have occurred. And so when we enter into this journey and we start to shift the pain to wisdom and rewrite the story, then it's like we can find all these levels of and layers of things that are like, okay, I'm ready to be released too. And sometimes I'll just like cry for no reason. Well, there's a reason, right? But I'll just find myself like in tears, and I'm like, I've learned to just like, oh, okay, like I'm just going with it, because it's like the body wants that release. And so really, taking the body along with us on this journey, because we can't be here without our physical body. So it's so important.
Part of it, we got to, embrace it and allow for it. Cause it's, unfortunately we too often try to control it and try to be the master of it, when really we're a partner with it. It's a tool, a very valuable tool that we are partnered with in this embodiment. Yet we don't always treat it that way. But yeah, so Amanda, I relate so much because, I shared with you that we were actually almost on the same timeline. I had kind of a spiritual episode from, I would say like October to now, maybe until January. So about the same timeline as you, but exactly the same thing happened, where very unexpectedly, I went on this trip across the country, and all this old emotional stuff started coming up, emotional turmoil, emotional stresses from my past that I thought I was done with. And just as you spoke to, like, I would have days where I would just cry the entire day. And at first I fought it, because I was like, oh no, like I'm having a breakdown, like there's something wrong. I shouldn't have gone on this trip. Like I made the wrong choice. And then I just came to embrace it. And I was like, feels like a release. Like this doesn't even feel like it's not a current feeling. It's literally just something like passing out of me, like an energetic clearing, getting out of my body. And so I allowed for it, but then I got sick too. It was like, after I had all these emotional upheavals, then just as you said, my body kind of had been holding out for so long, like allowing for that strain, that it finally kind of got ill and it needed a rest. So I got sick, and sometimes our bodies will do that to get us to slow down a little bit so we can regenerate.
Yeah, absolutely. I found the body is always trying to get our attention in every way, shape, and form. And I don't feel like there are any coincidences if, there's any ailment, or we label diseases with certain names and things, but it's always a deeper meaning. And there's oftentimes some sort of agreement we've made to this thing. Like, for example, I know someone, close to a family member, and they got a diagnosis, and there were no symptoms prior to the diagnosis. And several weeks after the diagnosis, there were symptoms of this illness and this ailment. And so it just speaks to the power of our consciousness, because it's, again, we're multidimensional beings. So all this stuff is multifaceted. And when I say we're multidimensional beings, it's like there's so many aspects to us that our human consciousness can't fully explain when we incarnate here. And I also want to preface everything I say that it's just coming from my lens. It's, take what resonates and leave the rest for those of you listening. And it just comes from a very humble place. This is just the best I've come up with at this point. But when we incarnate here, we're taking on this certain level of density to be in a physical body on what we call Earth. And so we have emotions as humans that we feel, and we don't have, like, no one handed us like a guidebook on this is how you do this. We're doing the best we can. And emotions can be a beautiful compass, and, but really just the power of choice, the power of our consciousness, the power of our identity. And that then creates we have those emotional responses. And so when we're young, And when we're even in our mother's womb, it's like we can already start to create these agreements and these identity structures and these belief systems. We can take them on from family. But the beautiful thing is that you're not stuck, because we can literally rewrite all of that, because nothing is permanent. It's all temporary, just even like this experience we're having as humans. So
yeah, absolutely. It's all, just a small little blip on the bigger scale of our entire experience. And so everything's amenable, everything's, transformable, and we're constantly experiencing transformation all the time. That's what we're doing day in and day out. We actually recreate ourselves every day. We're the ones who decide that we're going to show up the same way the next day, but really we have the free choice to recreate ourselves. So I love it, everything that you're sharing. And I do want to jump back to one thing that you said that I think is also pivotal when we talk about spiritual awakenings and people really embracing and being open and trusting the process is, so you spoke to having a significant breakup in a relationship that was a catalyst. And I love that you point that out, because I think it's important for people to recognize that that can often be the case, because you often also mentioned that it brought up a lot of your strong held beliefs about yourself, your limiting beliefs, your kind of set ideas and structures around things. And what I found is that I think that the reason why breakups can be such a catalyst is because nothing really rocks your core central fears and beliefs like that mirror that a relationship provides. That when you're not in a relationship, it can be kind of dormant. You might have little things like if people make comments or you don't get the validation you want, through work or other settings. But when a relationship comes in, really everything is out on the table. You're never as vulnerable and intimate with someone as you are in that kind of a partnership. You're sharing your life together. And that, I know, at least for me, brings up like the most hidden parts that I tend to forget about until I'm actually challenged in that way. And so when something like that ends, it's like you've drudged up all this stuff and you're left to be like, what was that? Like, what just happened? And what do I do with all of these realizations that I've had? And it's the perfect grounds for beginning to address them and release them and recognize what's no longer serving us, because it's often those beliefs that are keeping us from having an effective relationship. And so at least I found that all of my relationships that did not work out were leading me towards this like growth and opening to being able to connect with someone more directly, rather than being like sort of held back by my own fears, doubts, my own defenses that I'd put up because of my own wounds and such. Right.
Oh, 1,000,000%. And that's why I feel like there are certain people I talk to, I'm like, I feel like I'm talking to another aspect of myself, which it is, right?
Yeah,
because,
it is.
I like
throw one, but yeah, it's like,
a few of the words you use, like mirror. I've absolutely, it's like, there's kind of this thing where it's like, something and then you really get to know it at a cellular level, because I'd heard that term like, oh, like everything's just a mirror. I've just come to understand relationships in a whole new way. They are such beautiful mirrors. And so we can choose to look at it from a couple different perspectives. We can look at it from this more victim consciousness perspective. And I'm not saying that either right or wrong, it's a choice, or we can choose to look at it. I've come to look at these things as a gift, even though they can feel so painful sometimes and bring up so much pain, because I agree with you 110%. The experiences with relationships have brought up more of the density than anything else, because I believe that we can be on this transformation journey and we can experience things, we can go within and we can do that inner work. But there's something about like you had mentioned, when another person comes into the mix and then you have these different like ideas and expectations and attachments, and it brings up these patterns. Because if we're just talking about these patterns that we've created as children, and then we get to experience these same things in relationship. And for me, the wound that kept coming up, because my parents divorced when I was about 6 years old. And so the story and the perception around that for me was, well, if my dad leaves, which again, someone had to leave, right? If my dad leaves, then everyone's going to leave. I had this very deeply rooted abandonment wound around that. And there were, amongst other things, that my light was too bright, I was too much, it was my fault, all these things, everybody leaves, right? So what had happened was the patterning in these relationships is these men would show up. I would get on this high because it was like this reflection of what was possible. So I would like connect to that and I would get so attached. And then when it would get deflated, because that's not sustainable, right? I speak of this energy of it's sourcing from our own source connection and not plugging into like these external sources. Because again, when that balloon gets popped and you're left there and you're like, okay, well, I was getting all this energy and all this love and all this thing from this person.
Yeah.
And if I'm left in a place where I don't love myself and I don't feel worthy and everybody leaves, then I'm left with this story when this person takes off. That played out for the last X amount of years. I'm 32 now until last year. That story is neutralized. And it was a lot of tears. It was a lot of layers, a lot of men. But I share this because I feel like a lot of women go through this to where, there can be these, it's all a different flavor, right? Nobody has the exact same experience, but these things will show up and then we'll look at it as like, oh my gosh, like I'm on cloud 9. And then, he doesn't behave in a certain way that we want, or we don't get validated in a certain way. And then it's like that deflation energy. But when we're sourced from within and we do feel worthy and we are tapping into that inner wholeness, because you're not broken, you don't need to be fixed. Like there's nothing wrong with you. It's just all the lies, stories, distortions that mucked up that clarity of all the isness of who we really are, and that connection with our higher self and God, source, universe. So yes, 1,000,000%, like from what you just said, that's been my experience of it, but it just continued to show itself until it kind of culminated. And that's actually what kicked off the dark night of the soul last year, was a man and a relationship where and I feel like things are accelerated. I don't know if you're experiencing this, but the relationship was only like 2.5 weeks and I was in sham. Like it,
oh my
it was
gosh.
like, okay, we're gonna pop your balloon real quick there, lady. I was like, okay.
I totally relate. I hear you. It's like, what's wrong with me? Like that was like nothing. Like you couldn't even call that a relationship, and I'm like losing my shit.
Yep. And
Like,
then there's those stories too, which I'm like, okay.
Yeah. It's wild, but it's, I think it's also that, because what you're speaking to reminds me that so I think one thing is we do tend to draw partners. It's almost like our wounds are like drawing us towards one another. Because I find that the people that I've matched with are often had the same wounding that I do, whether it was abandonment or neglect or insecurity, that if I'll place all this blame, like, oh my gosh, this person is so that. And then I'll be like, well, wait a minute. Am I doing that? Is that within me? And I recognize that it always is, whatever I'm seeing in the other person is I'm experiencing with myself. And I think we do come together because we're all looking to heal so we can grow. We're all looking to heal so we can move on from these things. So that's the best way to heal something, is when with someone else because again, like you said, you're basically just looking at yourself. We're all connected ultimately. Yeah. So when you talk to another, you're talking to yourself. And so it's like, we're talking through and working through, how to overcome these things, how to heal. Right. But in relationships, it's just tricky because I think it's easier to become defensive, because it's not like you're just like, oh, cool, we're both wounded, let's heal. It's like, why aren't you doing what I want you to do? And like, it's more so bringing up our defenses are like these indicators of what we're struggling with. Right. Like you said, like you finally broke the cycle when you realize this is just a story that I keep telling myself over and over about a situation where that's not even the reality of the situation. It's the reality in my mind, but not like somebody else in the exact same situation might take a different conclusion, which to me indicates that that's my own, deep belief that I have, that I bring to each situation. Until you figure that out, you're going to keep bringing those same beliefs to every situation and painting the same picture, whether it's real or not.
Yeah. And I think it can be several different themes. For me, the theme was that I was terrified to be alone, but it was also like, I was terrified of being abandoned, but I was also terrified. I was just, it was kind of a balled up mess of a couple different things, but I was not comfortable like sitting with myself. I always felt like I had to be dating someone, or always felt like I had to be in a relationship in some way, shape, or form, having somewhere around, something to plug into. Right. And so it was after that period of time that I really like sat with myself and got to the place where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm at such peace with this. And it neutralizes. So I feel that it can be kind of that thing where we have that more, I don't love the word codependency, but it's like, we want to plug into that external source because it's like, we don't want to look at those parts from within, and it kind of puts a Band-Aid on it. Right. It's like in the ways that we consume just in general, where we're consuming, whether it be, food is a big one for people, real big one, where we are just consuming to fill those things up because we don't want to feel those parts that are like, excuse me, and maybe those parts don't even want to feel, because if we take it even further back and we're speaking of this lens of, working with our inner child and that little boy or little girl, it's like, how would we nurture this child? And it's like, sometimes it's just, can we not shame the shame for a moment? And can we pause the story, presence ourselves and take a deep breath and really just even identify what emotion's coming up, or even identify that I don't know the answer, but I'm going to take a deep breath and just sit here for just a moment, because we're so conditioned, societally speaking, to be chasing, right? We're not conditioned. There isn't this cultivation of like, all we have is right now. So can we just be in the now? It's what's the next best thing? What's the next best thing you're going to buy, consume, fill in the blank, right? We all have that thing that we've maybe chased at one time or another, but it's like, we get that thing and it's never as good as we think it's going to be. It's like almost like we're addicted to the anticipation of things.
Absolutely.
So
yeah. And then once we get that thing, we want something else. And it's funny you say this, because I was just thinking recently that, and this is a realization I had so I'm sober, I'm in sobriety from, drugs, alcohol, and eating disorder, you name it, sex addiction, love addiction, all the things. I can be addicted to anything, everything. And I remember thinking like, I hate not needing anything. I love to need things and I hate not needing things, and it basically is essentially saying like, I don't want to be like a Buddhist. Like, I don't like to just sit there and be okay. Like, I love the feeling of like, ooh, I really want this specific food. And then you get it and you get that fix. And then it's like, well, what do I want now? I want to want, and it's kind of like that, a very childish kind of immature state where you're just like, I constantly want to be getting something that gives me, you said it's like this, it's kind of like you're addicted to like what is it, like you said you were getting something, or
it's almost like the anticipation
like, right?
Yeah,
like, oh, I'm gonna get this. But then it's also like the effect of like, ooh, I really want this. And once you get it, it's like, oh, I got it. But then it's never, like anybody will tell you, like after you get that drink or after you get that food that you wanted, if you're in that addictive mindset, some people can take it and be satiated. But if you're constantly in that needing, the anticipation, the experience, all of that, it's never enough. It's like an empty bucket that you're never going to fill.
There's this beautiful tool, if you don't mind if I share it with listeners, that I came across the other day. Oh, so beautiful. So Jason Estes is, he puts out the most amazing messages, content. And he was talking about food, and the way he worded it, I'll have to look it up, but if you don't mind, I'm just going to look up what it was called, because it was literally just like the way that it was worded was so great, breaking out of the food game. But this is kind of can be tied to anything. And he's like, it was like a minute and a half of the clip. And he's like, next time you feel that instinctual urge to like, go get that thing, and we can literally speak of this to anything. He's like, I'm going to give you an invitation, put a hand on the heart, or two hands on the heart, a hand on the head, bring in the light of God, take a deep breath and just allow that to like come through your being, like sourcing from that source connection. Take a deep breath and then ask yourself if you still want that thing. And it like breaks the story. And this was a couple of weeks ago, and I'm not a heavy drinker by any means, but I was guided to like, I'm choosing to release alcohol, at least for the next 100 days. And I'm playing around with that because it's like, every time I even have a couple glasses of wine, I wake up the next day and I'm like, oh, I feel like I poisoned my body. And it just doesn't feel good to me anymore. So it's like, maybe it's like that story or the pattern may need that thing, but like your soul and your physical vessel might not really need that thing that we think that we need. So when we allow that space for the pause, it breaks up the story that's narrating and the pattern, and it allows us to make that conscious decision rather than allowing the story to take over and be like, okay, we're just going to go get this thing. Not that certain things are wrong by any means, but it's like, can we tune into that divine intelligence that is within us and ask us if this is something that is expansive, or does it feel kind of contracting when we actually ask ourselves at that deeper level?
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes the pause to actually access deeper levels, and to take any of this into consideration, we have to pause and not keep going, as you described, like on to the next thing we want to get. But Amanda, everything you just described reminds me of when I was first having like probably like my second significant awakening, when I was like 31 or 2. I remember reading that it was like a book about like overeating or addiction or something like that. And it said something like, the only thing we're ever really hungry for is love. And to me, love is synonymous with God, with spirit, with energy, with the universe, all is one. So, and I realize that, it's so true. When we're seeking out something so desperately, it's not like we just desperately want cake, even though cake is delicious. And, but it's not like that. We're seeking out this comfort, this thing, which ultimately is our connection with spirit. It's our connection with what truly is. And we think we can find it through cake and through a drink, because those things can give you that sense for a bit, like, God, this feels so soothing and good. And I think about that a lot because I struggle with bulimia. And when you're in a fit of a binge, there's never enough. And you're just like, can I finally get enough that I feel satiated? But again, if you're just seeking out love and you think you're going to find it through food, you're not. It's only when, like you described, when you actually let it come into you, which sounds so like, woo woo or whatever, like too spiritual, like that. I want to go, I actually want to go eat all this cake. But it really is just the notion of like allowing yourself to have something enter you and for you to experience it rather than to just sort of like keep trying to force or stuff something in that's not being received, if that makes sense.
Because they can all be ways that we try to numb stuff. And I want to just even validate that feeling numb sometimes is helpful. Like when we have like overwhelming amount of emotions, that can be beautiful too. So again, there's like no right or wrong way for any of this, but yeah, it's so interesting. So I feel like it's so powerful for us each to learn our own tools and practices and play around with how we process energy and intuition, because we all process it in such a unique and different way, I feel. And this isn't black and white, and there's no one size fits all. So it's learning to work with your own energy body, your own energy field. Like for me, I feel things so deeply in my body. And I've even learned to play around. I absolutely love human design. I don't know if you're familiar, but
that's great.
Like, yeah. So I'm a sacral generator. So just practicing, like tuning into that gut response of like what is a yes and what is a no. And it's been game changing.
Yeah. And that must come from you said you had that womb stuff. Cause I've actually talked to a lot of women who look for yeses and nos from their womb. So you said sacral generator, right? Is that what you described it?
Yeah. So for me, it's all about like this gut. This gut response where it's like when we have like when we're responding to something, most of the time within the first second or two, it's like, we know if it's a yes or a no, but then it's like, the people pleaser in us might take over. The mind might be like, oh, well, we could do this thing, but it's like, well, I don't really want to. And I don't really need to have a reason why I don't want to. I just don't want to.
Yes. Yeah. It takes a lot of discernment. And I struggle with that so much. Like, what is my fear response and what's my intuition? What am I listening to? And I think it just takes a level of maturity, but also just practice and exposure, just allowing yourself to be with it and just seeing how things play out in that regard. But I think, listening to that inner voice, that inner wisdom, that's been a message that's been coming in a lot for this eclipse for me is, because I'm always asking questions and I'm always fearful that I'll get it wrong. Well, am I supposed to do this? Am I supposed to not do this? Should I take this position? Should I not? And it's always the same answer, which is like, just go within, just listen, just trust. Because really there's no wrong answer. Not anywhere.
I agree.
There's no wrong move to make, because ultimately whatever choice we make is because that's the choice that we need to make for our highest good at that time. Even if later we're like, why did I do that? Things got all messed up. And it's because you needed to go that way to gain what you needed to gain in order to next time you're not going to do it again because you've learned, or maybe you have to do it 10 more times, but eventually we all will learn the lesson and move on. But it starts with practicing listening to, because that inner guidance always knows the quickest way. It's always going to tell you that you could do it this way. And you're like, I'm going to do it this way. And they're like, okay, then that's what you needed to do right now to learn. And I'll see you down the road later.
Yeah. Well, and it's like circling back to the power of the pause, right? Because to me, the pause is like synonymous even with like meditation. My dog, he came over, he's sniffing the window.
Like, what kind of dog?
My dog, like smelling the flowers. He's like,
oh, he's enjoying what kind of dog is he?
He's a golden retriever.
Oh, sweetie.
Yeah, maybe he'll come over. Buddy, come say hi.
My doggy's on the bed.
Yeah, they're just the sweetest. They come in sometimes with little messages.
They do. She's my guardian for sure. Mine is my unfamiliar. Mine's definitely a familiar for me. She's been with me for many lifetimes.
I feel like that with mine too. Yeah, they're so sweet. But anyway, squirrel moment with the dogs. I love it. But yeah, I just feel like it's, for me, meditation's like listening and receiving. So it's like in the power of the pause, when we're not in that more action oriented energy, it's like we can then be a receiver. We can be a receiver of even prosperity and information. We can be a receiver of new friendships. But sometimes when we're in that do, and we want to try to like in that more like force energy, and sometimes action and all that's perfect too. But at the same time, it's like we can kind of calculate for each of us, like what type of energy do we spend a lot of our time in? For me, back in the day when I was in college and when I was in law enforcement, I was literally in action mode. Probably when I wasn't sleeping, that was the only time it wasn't. And I probably was then because my body was probably trying to catch up. So I was so burnt out. And I think that's another reason why the whole last year was just so much deep healing and a lot of sleeping and nurturing of my body, more feminine flowy energy, because I had never really experienced that.
Yeah, you had to rest and regenerate, and tapping the feminine means those roots are opening, grounding you. That's beautiful. And something else, Amanda, that I wanted to speak to. So, because I know you're a holistic healer, and you're also a new earth visionary. So you're big about, what we're creating, what we're moving into, which is a big part of my experience and vision as well. As I just have this pull towards, like, I sense this like totally different world that looks like ours, but very, very different in how we live our lives and how we experience things. And one of the big visions I have, which is what you're speaking to, is right now we're in such a need, want thing, like these cycles that we just described, right? We're such consumers. We're avid consumers. Anything, like I said, like I want to need something all the time. I want to need that new, that new product, that new thing, that new pursuit, that new, whatever it is. I want to need things because it feels good to get them, have that effect, and then move on to the next. However, there's a fire that fuels that, right? It's, again, we talked about just not being satiated by true essence, by energy, by love. We're not really receiving or holding love. And when we start to do that, we don't need very much at all. The reality is that we don't need anything. Ultimately, when we go back to the one state, right? We need nothing. We just are. And we are back to the one, but we're playing this game of remembering that. And so it's like we feel like we're a physical body that has a lot of different needs, which we do when we're in this mindset. But as we evolve and ascend and grow, we recognize we need less and less. I was actually just listening to a transmission about the Pleiadians, which are, another species that are, the idea is that they're like our future, and they're like kind of guiding us towards that, again, this new world. And they talk about, as you ascend, you can start to eat lighter and lighter foods. Like it's good to sometimes kind of switch out, your meals for smoothies and drink a ton of water, because it lightens your energy as you are also ascending and becoming more lighter. It'll be more conducive to, rather than these heavy meals that are very dense, but are also good. So it's hard to let go of. But anyways, my point is that I feel that my vision of the new earth is where we don't have these needs. And what that changes everything, because if you look around our world is based on catering to our needs. Like if you look at big corporations, we all get really worked up about how people who own these corporations make all the money. But the reality is that we feed into these systems because we're all needy consumers. But when we start to recognize we don't need very much, and we can be satiated with very little, and we learn to love and accept ourselves, that changes the game for everything. When we accept ourselves, we don't feel like we need things to be acceptable, like certain beauty products or clothes or cars or all these things. I'm not condoning those in any way. Like I love all those, or not condemning them. I think it's nice to have nice things if you want them, but not to have to need them, in a unnecessary way, like where you're just using it to be like, okay, will this make me feel better? So I think like, it's like we have this epidemic of neediness. And when we release that, the whole world changes, because then these big corporations we get frustrated with have no energy. They have no life force. We give them our life force. But if we stop needing them, if we all suddenly shifted, Amazon would be out of business, because we wouldn't need 1,000 things every single day, all the time,
My gosh, I love this conversation and everything about it. And I feel like these conversations come up at the most perfect time, because I was in meditation this morning and I just heard fulvic acid. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. What's fulvic acid? I had to look it up. And I was like, okay, first of all, is this like for something for me? Like, is this something that I need? And I got a yes. And I said, okay. And I looked it up, and fulvic acid is all around like helping like metabolize, and it's helpful for like the gut to digest like meats and plants and all the things. Right. And so I had never heard, I've heard of folic acid before, but I've never heard of fulvic acid. And I hear it so vivid, so profoundly. And I'm like, okay, so this is something my body's asking for. I get a yes, and tuned into that. And I said, okay, is my body asking for like a tangible supplement? And I got a no. And I was like, that's interesting. I said, can I just tune into the frequency of fulvic acid at its purest form and just get the code or whatever you want to call it and just receive this? And I got a yes. And then I just felt this energy like come through. And so I love that it circles into this conversation, because I love playing around with it. Everything is free. Everything is available already here on this planet. And it truly is like, I've been so guided into that less is more. Like last year, I probably spent like $5,000 on like gyms and trainings and all these things. And I was so guided to just drop it all. Like, I know what I need to do, like that sort of thing. And I'm just lightening the load in so many different areas. Like I'm even playing, I love coffee so much, but I'm even playing around with, I haven't had coffee in a week and I feel great. So it's just, I feel like we're just being guided to just let go of the things that are, less is more. And then it's like, okay, we're going to also, as a byproduct of listening to that intuition and lightening the load, first of all, we're going to like step more into our light body, which is really, I truly believe where we're going, because I truly believe that the human being is an immortal being. Like our divine template is immortal, and that we actually can shift out of this form when we choose. And don't ask me how I know that, or how I think that, like, it's just kind of that intuitive.
We all know that. We all got it. It's in our DNA.
Right. Exactly.
Everything in the whole universe is in our DNA. We just aren't connected with it because we chose to. That's again, it's like we're playing a game here. It's the game of like forgetfulness.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
We come here and we're like, what are we? We're just cells that showed up on a planet. No, but you'll
So I couldn't provide proof, but it's just like this inner knowing of where we're headed. And so it's like I truly believe we're reverse aging. Like for me, I've seen photos of myself like 5 years ago, and I look so different now. And I'm like older now. So I'm like, okay, but it's like, we have to choose it. We have to be willing to receive it and play with it. And like this morning when that came through, I was like, okay, I'll play with you, like universe, whatever. And because the thing is if everything carries a unique signature and a unique frequency, let's say, for example, like, cause sometimes the human mind will be like, that sounds super woo woo, but I can pick up this phone right here and I can call you on this phone, and it's just a frequency that it's connecting to. And you could pick the phone up and we're in different places on the planet, same state, but still, and we can have a conversation on the phone. So it's the same type of thing when we're tuning into a specific radio dial frequency. Yes. I feel like it's just the possibilities here are just exponentially endless. And it also ties so beautifully into what you just said, because we're going to need less and less, which gives less and less fuel and power to these big corporations that have been, the puppets or whatever. We can go down rabbit holes. We'll save that for another time, but we're breaking and collapsing these systems that are just not working because we've evolved past them.
They're unnecessary. They're going to become unnecessary. Yeah. And once things become unnecessary, then they will naturally fall away. And that's, it's hard for us to think of, because right now we see things as they are, and we're all frustrated. It's like, we're all like, it's such a difficult place, because like, we're all like cursing these things, but yet we're still like attached to them. It's like, God, I hate this thing, but yet I'm going to keep paying money towards it because I need it for my, weekly groceries or whatever it is, like I struggle with like going to, mainstream grocery chains, because I'm like, oh, I don't even know if they're, environmentally friendly, or if they're, just morally sound in their operations. I don't know, but I really need to get some dinner tonight, so I'm going to go. You know what I mean? So it's like we feel beholden to them, but eventually, like you said, like we aren't going to need like this kind of convoluted access the way that we've created things, because things really can be more immediate, which sounds like really far out there, but it's just like you said, it's just true. It's just what is. And we're eventually going to tap into that. Like you getting that Fralic, can you spell it for us?
Fulvic acid. I had to like be like, wait, what is this? Yeah, it's FULVIC, fulvic acid.
Fulvic acid. Yeah. Like that's, to me, that's the true nature of reality, is that literally everything that we want is right at our fingertips. And eventually we evolve to realize that if we want like some life force, then we just breathe it in and we don't have to go to the store and buy food. But we're way far out from that. But that's also like my knowing, like the strange sense I have that like, yeah, that's just what it's going to be. And some people will be like, what are you talking about? That's bizarro, but I don't know. I don't care.
I know, there's got to be like a certain level of writing the script. And so like, I'm fine. I'll stand out there on the stage, like, and be the person that says, oh, this will work for me. Take it or leave it if you want.
Yeah. Just throw it out there. Throw it out there. But if
a long time to get there.
Yeah. But if we want to talk about like small steps at a time, I think it's just the idea of, like you said about coffee, what do I think I need that I may just have gotten used to having? And can I try being without it? That's how I started getting away from alcohol. I was like, I feel so tied to this. And like, I need it for so many things to feel like I have fun, to relax, to socialize. And so I started exploring with being away with it. And I didn't do well with not having it. And I wanted it back. And so but then it became very obvious that it was causing a lot of chaos in my life and destruction. But I've had so many things like that. I had the same relationship with coffee because coffee is ultimately a drug, an amazing drug that I loved. And I actually gave it but I don't know if you just do water now, but I started doing like a mix of like cacao powder and mushroom powders, because mushroom are like these like super fungi foods and I love them. So that's my fun thing, because I like to have something in the morning to drink. It's part of my ritual.
We're in the same frequency, girl, because I was just telling my friend today at lunch, I'm like, I'm craving cacao. That's going to be my replacement for coffee. It's so like nourishing to the soul.
No, that's it.
We were even searching out cacao with this little town we were in, and they actually had it. But then I got in there and I'm like, oh my gosh, breakfast just hit me. I'm so full. So I was like, okay, at least I know that they serve it here, and I'm going to get some to make some at home, because it just feels so nourishing. It feels more expansive to me. So, and I just love it anyways. And it has good stuff in it, but I love it.
It's so good. It has so many great antioxidants and things that helps like blood flow and circulation. But yeah, I'm telling you, I use that, and like they have all these powdered mushrooms now. If you're into that, like people are big into like the mud water, which is basically like different mushroom powders and water. But if you use like lion's mane and like cordyceps, all of that, it helps with your memory function, your nerve system, energy levels, like all very natural because it comes from mushrooms. So just an idea to mix in and, you have fun with it. And it's a nice replacement because it doesn't cause a crash for me or headaches like coffee did. So coffee would always it was interesting. Actually, someone on the show that pointed out that any food, but coffee is a spirit. And just like we call alcohol spirits, it's because it embodies us. Like everything has its own consciousness. We're going to get kind of esoteric again, but everything has a consciousness. So when we bring it into our body, it's like, how do you dance with that spirit? Like, how do you dance with the spirit of coffee? Which again, sounds so bizarre, but it is. And because I loved coffee, but I noticed every time I drank it, it was like, it didn't sit well with me. Like I loved that I felt energized, but it was like not quite right for my body. And I was fighting it for the longest time because I didn't want to let it go.
Oh, me too. I've been fighting it for a long time. To me, it feels like very acidic in my body and my stomach is not happy with it. And then I was thinking about, I'm like, I always say like, I'm not a big sugar person, but yet I'm having, a pump or two of vanilla in my coffee. That's a lot of sugar. Yeah. So it's like, even just those little things where you may not even notice it. Where it just, my body, and, I love coffee as well, but it was like, my body was like, okay, we're ready to let this go. Yeah. And so now I was thinking about it, and there's almost like this thing where I'm just like, and it's only been a week. Ask me in 2 weeks. I don't know. Maybe I'd be like, oh, I'm back on coffee. Probably not, but, but the cacao, like the energy of that just feels more expansive. And so, yeah, I completely agree with you. Everything carries a certain consciousness and a frequency and a resonance. And it's like, sometimes too, it's like when we're resonating in a certain frequency, like the things that just don't match that anymore and that don't feel expansive fall away because it just doesn't feel good when we consume them. And that could be anything from TV to a certain particular person to the food. And another thing that was really powerful was in the same Jason Estes video that he said, he's like, I also recommend like when the food does come out, that you bless the food. And it's like, so, like it's a thing we've heard so many times, like, oh, pray over your food. But I understood this at a deeper level that really clicked for me, because he's like, who knows who was making it, like, and what energetic state they were in when they were making it. And who knows what state that animal was in when it died, if you're eating it or consuming meat. Who knows where that plant's consciousness was when it got trimmed or when, it got plucked from the thing, because everything carries that resonance and consciousness, like we've been talking about. So he's like, like bless that food and infuse your energy into that food. And we can even do this with water. And there was another thing I learned recently about putting your water on your heart, because our bodies are primarily made of water. So the water will sync up with your body and what your body needs. And then you can also infuse beautiful intention into the water. And so it's like you in the water, like your consciousness is in the water and you're filling your body with that consciousness. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that's happening.
That's going to happen. That's my energy.
I'm going to do that to my dogs. I'm going to put my dog's water bowl in my heart and infuse it with love.
I love it. I'm within you now.
Yeah. I'm like
my life,
prosperous life and lots of bones
energy. And so funny. Yeah. But it's totally true. And I begin the practice of blessing my food for so many reasons. One is that this food has been on this long journey that we know nothing about to get to where we are. So number one, it's like so grateful that this thing had origins. All we think of is that it comes from a supermarket and we're like, it just came from the shelf. Its life started so much longer before that to get to us. But then also to your point, we don't know where it's been. We don't know, what it went through to get there. And I found it so interesting because I tend to be a very hustle bustle person. So I'll, go from work and then just sit down and eat really fast. And so I kind of made myself slow down. And I would turn off any, electronics or TV or sound, and I would just bless the food, and you can feel its vibration. You can feel everything's vibration, but, and I started blessing my water, but I would just notice that every different food had different feelings. And often some food didn't feel good. Like it would almost hurt my hands. And I'd be like, that is probably like if it came from a place that maybe wasn't like, I don't know, like a very ethical place or something, or it had like it was tainted or dirty or I don't know, you know what I mean? You could just kind of sense it. And with water, you'll notice, my friend pointed out that if you drink a sip of water, but then you bless it, it'll taste a little bit different. It'll feel a little bit smoother or anyways, it's interesting stuff. It's all vibration.
It's such a thing. It's such a thing because if we can even like use an example, like let's say I'm in a foul mood and I go into a room, people are going to feel that. And some people may pick up on that. So it's like the same thing with food. It's literally the same thing. Because if everything foundationally is energy, then we're literally just here to play with all these different frequencies, and we can like tune it to our own little set point.
and when that's like the trick of the universe. And once we figure that out, again, all the games end. We're playing so many games. We play so many games.
So many games. This is literally like, I actually wonder sometimes, because I mean, if anyone tells me exactly what happens when we die, I'd love to talk to them, or if this is a simulation or what it is. But because I mean, there's so many possibilities of what we could be. Like we could be in a dream. Like I don't fully understand it, but I'm here. So I'm experiencing it. But it's like, maybe when we take the headset off and we're like, okay, that was fun. Or, it's just like, it's just so many things to play around with. But what I've found is beneath like all the density, once we're really connected with the truth of who we are, it just becomes this powerful journey to where I can be like, okay, like I am, like the powerful phrase of like, I am, or stepping into choice. Like I choose this. At the beginning of January, I was like, I choose to see the truth in all things, regardless if it's like whatever, like I choose to see the truth, like speaking specifically of what's pertinent for my own journey and within myself. And I'm willing to see the truth. And then all these truths and things started showing up. And I was like, can I just hit the off button to that? I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. But I just really, I joke, but I wouldn't have it any other way, because I feel like once you feel the resonance of who you truly are at that deep level, like we're all here to bring some sort of magic and experience some sort of, passion and live that out. And we simply don't have to continue suffering. Not that, I feel like there's a difference too between like kind of struggling through things and, moving, pivoting and whatnot, and then like really being in this victim kind of struggle consciousness. Like we can really choose to pull ourselves out of that. And even if we don't know what it looks like if you're in that place to where you're just kind of like, if you're still breathing, you're still here, so we're good to go. Like there's still like, we can still shift, but really just moving out of that consciousness. And again, if we don't know, like maybe putting a hand on your heart, closing your eyes, and just asking your higher self, God, source, universe, for help and to show you, and proclaiming that you're willing and you choose to. And then it's like, we don't need to see the next 10 steps. Maybe it's just that one step that's like, okay, this is the next thing on your path that's lit up.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that you spoke to that we all are, we all have this unique, special essence that in the form of a gift or an offering that comes through. I talk about that all the time because that's the purpose of this show, is that I wanted to create a platform for people who have gotten connected with that gift. So one, they can share about how they got connected with it, and two, share what it is. This is what I found. This, and most of it is healing, but then I also have guests who it's creative, it's a creative expression, because creativity is beautiful. It inspires joy and, empowerment to others. So there's so many different things. And I talk about analogies a lot of how with each of our gifts, it's like a picture being lit up. It's like a mosaic, and each person is like a tile in that picture. And we need every single piece to really see the full phenomenal picture that is humanity. And I think it's really cool to recognize that humanity is a unique expression into the universe. And if we don't allow each light to come through, it will never be quite as brilliant as it could be. But everything is, we think we're alone in the universe. I personally don't think that at all.
I don't think that either.
And there's like rumbling. People talk about how we're actually like, we're kind of like the black sheep, or like the backwater planet, because people are like, gosh, that planet Earth is a mess. But they also say like, it's such low vibration. There's so much fear here that no one will come near us. The same way, like you're saying, like a really negative person, people avoid, because you get close to them and you're like, I don't want to get tainted by their energy's off. Their energy is, I don't like to be around it. And that's what I've heard people speak of about Earth, is that we've gotten so low that people are like, we're not going out there. But I think aliens still have come out here. But anyways, I think that as we let our gifts come, and as we get into this, we release fear and move more into love, which is exactly what we're describing when we realize we don't need anything. Everything is within us. We're perfect just as we are. That's all loving. All the fear stuff is the neediness, the addiction, the pain, the wounds, all these misconceptions of who we really are. As we move into who we really are, our light begins to show, and then we get reconnected with the cosmos, which they've been waiting for us. That's another thing I've heard. Again, I know this is also crazy, but it's not though.
No, I agree. Everything you're saying, I'm like,
I know you get it. I know.
I get it.
Feel like I need to use all these disclaimers for the audience, but I'm sure they get it too. But yeah, it's this idea that, like I heard one analogy that the solar system is like, or the cosmos are like pulling up their lawn chairs. Like this is the Super Bowl, because what's going on at Earth right now is so unique. It hasn't happened basically ever in the entire history of the universe, where this planet is going from such low density that we're about to shift into like higher density and in like, or, like higher frequency in like an instant. And it's never been seen before. So it is like this pivotal moment where it's like, are they going to do it? Are they going to do it? And that's why things are changing so much, because there's this rumbling and everything's about to break apart. So I just love that, picturing like people pulling up their lawn chairs to watch this showdown on planet Earth that we're experiencing. And so that's why I think it's so important to speak to our experiences of spiritual awakenings, and for people to honor the process and to trust it, because there's nothing to be afraid of. We can't die. Not really. We can die to this body, but we're infinite. So even if something happens, I know for me with my spiritual awakening, I got super sick. I got COVID, and then I got long COVID, and it scared the hell out of me. It was awful, because we don't know about long COVID. Right. And so I'd have all these weird symptoms and be like, are they going to be forever? Is it going to go away? And, thankfully it's gotten a lot better, but I was terrified. But the reality is that a lot of it was just it was an awakening. It was those symptoms as well, combined with this very real virus. So, it's, I think it's important for people to hear that, so they can like sit with some peace through these moments, because we don't know what ascension or spiritual awakening will look like specifically for any one person, but we can, just like anything else, we can hear someone else's experience and feel comfort and confirmation that, okay, I can walk through this too, and I'll be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything you just said. And it was so funny. As you said, there was a rumbling. This person started their diesel truck, and it was like sounded like a rumbling. So it was like confirmation. But I totally believe that. I actually think that everything happening on the planet right now, it's like a collective dark night of the soul. And I truly believe that if everything is a frequency and it's all based on consciousness, because for me, in the last handful of years, like I have really had to work through kind of some like emotions around like the corruption and all these things. I'm very neutral to it. Yeah. And it's like, what is in our reality? So you were speaking to like kind of this energy of fear. And so for those of you listening that are maybe kind of struggling with this energy of fear, maybe like the narratives going on, my invitation and recommendation would be to unplug from those things, because anything that is meant to keep you in a state of fear and anchor in that chaos it's just not serving you in any way, because it's just really bringing your vibration down. And I have even a couple theories. I'm like, what if consciously, collectively, what if I do feel that we created even the things that have happened in the last couple of years, because it was like, again, we were talking about the breakup as a catalyst. Like, think about how crazy of a catalyst this was in the last couple of years. So many people, I quit my job. I know so many people that quit their jobs. They're more into like that self-discovery, that dark night of the soul. They're releasing the acknowledgements, all these things. And so if everything is just based on the lens that we're looking from, if something isn't in our reality, if like we don't choose to subscribe to those stories, then it's like not part of the narrative. Yes, so it's just very interesting, because we do have the power to choose. And I do feel like we're at this beautiful pivotal point, and I do feel like we're going to push through, because I feel like there's enough people that have that awareness and that are waking up, that I do feel like we're not necessarily leaving anybody behind, but it's going to kind of pull the tail end of people who maybe are still kind of anchored in that fear, because sometimes we need to kind of have that reflection and see something. It's like the things that we recognize in our, and another, it's like, is within ourselves often, and it can be triggering and activating in either like an uncomfortable way or a beautiful way. I heard the other day, someone said, like when we have these feelings of jealousy for another, it's just an aspect of ourselves that part of us really wants to bring forward, but we're looking at it from like, like how dare they, or, money is bad and they have too much, fill in the blank, right?
Yeah.
But we can start to really, again, if we just bring everything back to home, back to center, it's like, you are worthy. Everything you need is inside of you, even your own unique medicine. I do truly believe that the body has this divine intelligence within it. When we were in our mother's wombs, we weren't giving instructions to the liver of what to do. We weren't saying, hey, hands, you're going to form today. Like, it was this divine intelligence that just knows what to do. So it knows how to heal you. We just have to create the space to allow these things to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as you said, that making space for that we have to be jolted out of our current beliefs, because how can you move into a different belief if you're super stuck on doing the same thing every day that verifies and validates the beliefs over and over again? And I do think absolutely the shift with the pandemic changed our belief systems in so many ways about what's possible. How 3 years ago, like 3 years ago now, we would have never thought that you could do almost everything online. I remember I would have like get-togethers sometimes, and people would be like, oh, could we like Zoom it, or could we like be on virtually? And I'd be like, no, we're gathering. Like, if you're going to be there, you're going to be there in person. And now it's like, yeah, of course. Like, if we don't have to be there in person, we can do this virtually. And that's like our belief system changed about that. And that we don't have to, be on site in an office, or just so many different things. Right. Yeah. So all of that and it opens the door for us to be like, well, if that I can do differently, maybe I can do something else differently, and so it goes back to the same thing as like the coffee. It's like, well, do I really need this? And when I try to go without it, what does that open the door for when I shift that? And then when I think about coffee, what I was also going to mention is it makes me think of, when you talk about accessing that ferulic acid.
Yeah.
I think about think about when we realize that we don't need coffee for energy. That's why we drink it. It's delicious. It feels good, but we drink it because we think we need that. We're like, oh God, I'm so tired. I need it. I'm still in that trap. I like caffeine, but energy is totally natural. And once we realize that we can just kind of breathe it in, like what you do with that stuff, everything changes. But also, like, down goes Starbucks and other things. So I think there is
I'm fine with that.
I know, right? And things can go away, and it's fine. It's the same. Like, for me, it's like, people are like, well, what would we do if like these big corporations went out of business? It's like, well, we would evolve. We'd figure it out. The same way where I'm a therapist, I'm a mental health therapist, and my hope is to be out of a job, because when people learn how to give to themselves their own healing, and to not even get to the point where they're so distraught mentally because of their circumstances, but we know better, myself included. Like, I have my own therapist, but I believe that one day therapists will be out of a job when we know better about how to not take things to heart. Because I think a lot of mental illness is believing that certain things are because of us. Like, if they're a deficit about it, there's something wrong with us, they mean something bad. We're very stuck on like things being bad. Right.
Yeah,
and that breeds a lot of
good and bad. Yeah.
Yeah. And that breeds a lot of,
I don't really, that to me, I don't know. That doesn't resonate. Like, good and bad, right and wrong. Like, I think that, because again, like, my definition of good might not be someone else's definition of good. So it's very subjective, right? And it's like very unique to each of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it just causes us a lot of grief to be in that programming. So Yeah, I just think it's going to be interesting because all of that is going to change and we're going to realize we don't need these things and these things will fall away. And then what? Then what do we build? Well, it could be something really beautiful, but it's not going to go without a fight because the structures that are want to remain. And I will say that I think that, and I don't think anyone can argue that a lot of systems in place recognize the power of fear to generate power. Right now, most power comes from fear. You don't have someone doesn't agree to give you their power unless you give them a good reason enough to be scared enough to do so.
Yeah. There's actually kind of a quick little fun story that I just heard of the other day, and it's tied to this and kind of the fear. Cause honestly, mainstream media to me, no judgment for those who watch it, but it's just anchored in fear and just like the narrative of,
well, that's how they get viewers. You don't have
stuff.
Viewers. People aren't going to, if it's just like a nice, like narrative of the current situation, like then people are gonna be like, oh, that's nice, but I'm not gonna watch it. But when people are like, if you don't watch this, you're not gonna know. They have to keep us tied in. It's their livelihood.
Yeah. So
it breeds on that.
There was something where, so CNN, where they were launching this app, CNN Plus, and I don't know like the nuances of what this was going to offer, but they funneled $300 million into marketing for it. And I mean, they're a pretty big beast of a company, right? And again, this was coming from one of my mentors. So I didn't do a deep dive into this, but I do trust this person's information sources. So apparently only around like 10,000 people signed up. So the whole program was squashed. And it just speaks to, I feel like what kind of comes to this is like the big corporate greed and all of those systems are just crumbling to the ground because people at a whole, like, yes, there are some people who are still kind of anchored in there, but actually aren't resonating with that anymore because we are evolving past that. So I actually feel like it's starting to happen. I believe Netflix lost a bunch of subscribers recently. So it's just like people are, I feel like finding different outlets, and I feel part of the place we're headed is more of that connection, that community, that heart-centered, human interaction, and this kind of new levels where we're not just engulfed in, not saying that like, I don't ever watch a TV show. I try not to consume too much TV, but it's just one of those things where it's like, well, where do we want to funnel our energy and funnel our time? Our dogs have gotten up, both of our dogs.
There's somebody walking past and the other dog's out there barking, and now my dog's barking. Your dog probably heard it.
Yeah. He's up and moving.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, again, you're, as a New Earth visionary, like that's my vision, is like, there's an earth that awaits us where fear is replaced by love, and everything is based in love. Every exchange, every action, our work, everything we do. And the fear just dissolves, because fear will dissolve because it's not real. Fear is always an illusion. Love is the only thing that's real. It's just what is.
Yeah.
And it might take time, but also, I mean, that stuff can happen really fast. When something's not real, you give it all your power, and the second you kind of figure it out, it's just gone, Yep. And I know it's like, I know it's in some movie, but like, I don't know. I almost picture, this is such a throwback, but have you ever seen the movie The Labyrinth? I love that movie.
I have not,
like the
no.
80s with David Bowie. Oh my gosh.
I have not.
So good. But anyways, he's like this like goblin king is his name. And this girl who's like stuck in his maze of this like bent reality world, suddenly she realizes, she's like, you have no power over me. And he looks at her like terrified, and he just like dissolves, because he was never real. He was only real because she was giving him the power that he was. So that's kind of the world we live in. And as soon as we all collect, enough of us collectively see this illusion, we can decide what we want next. And that just shows you that it's not bad. What's going on right now is not bad. But I mean, it is, we could say it's out of balance, because some people are gravely suffering and some people are high and, have all the resources, some have none. So we could call it an imbalance. If we don't want to label it good or bad, we could just say it's not very preferable. Yeah. You want something where everybody's able to access the basic things they need for life. We're not even there. And that's like really strange if you think about it, that we don't prioritize that. And I talk a lot on the show about how I think that in like hundreds of years from now, people will talk about this time period as like this anomaly, as like this unbelievable, as a parable of like, this is the way that Earth once was. And our people in 500 years are going to be like, no, there's no way life was ever like that. And we'll be like, yeah, it was. And it was awful. And that's why we have to remember that and never get caught up in fear and greed again, because it can create this beast of inequality and fear that is just horrific. You know, we're not able to enjoy life much right now because we're all so stuck in this, but life is meant to be enjoyed. It's a pretty badass place. It's a lot of fun when we're able to like, and when people talk about, you know, well, everyone deserves the right for their pursuit and to gain what they want. Well, yeah, but let's all do it together. Like when we talked about finding your unique gift and bringing it forward, that can feel great. And you don't have to be like, I think we're in such a state of mind of like, if you win, then I can't win. A zero-sum game, right? If you're big and powerful, then I can't be. So I have to be bigger and powerful than you. No, we can all be our own unique light and expression. And therefore we don't need to compete with anybody because nobody has quite what we have. And that's the truth. That's just the truth of the matter.
I agree with 100% on that as well. I just feel like where we're headed, like the structures of hierarchy just don't exist there. Because that is like, again, it's like those levels and layers. If I'm better than you, I have X, Y, and Z. And not to say there's not going to be different types. I feel like there's going to be different leadership roles in certain areas, but when we're all leading ourselves and when we're connected from that heart-centered place, it's just so fluid because it just doesn't end up having to be this pursuit or, you know, the ego consuming certain things or, you know, poor practices around even manufacturing. Just, I mean, we could go so deep into these cycles of consumerism, and we were kind of talked about it before. It's like, you know, if everything is already available, like the fact that people are suffering greatly, it's like, well, no, that doesn't have to be so. And so we can really start to shift this narrative and the story that's been played out for thousands and thousands of years. And I agree with you. I think, you know, I don't know exactly how long it's going to take. I don't know about you, but for me, time now seems so weird. It like yesterday, I was like, I feel like I lived like a couple days today. Like
you're like my fifth guest in a row who said that, who's like, what is time anymore anyways? And that's another thing too, is time is just a construct. So in the future, we might be much less attached to that concept of time. Right now, we're very attached to it. But I mean, that too in itself is just an illusion. So eventually we could really release that. You know?
Because I feel like there's somewhere, like the way I like to explain, it's like we have this quantum field of possibilities. And if everything's already available, there's already a timeline where we're actually already in this new earth or whatever we want to call it, living this out. And so we actually have access to that right now. We already have access to it. We can literally, if everyone on the planet paused and dropped in, or even maybe 50% dropped in and we're like, yes, we choose this. We are like choosing this frequency, embodying this frequency. It's like, everything's already available. Like, that's why even like, you know, if you're here, like saying, oh, I'm ready to call my soulmate. Well, he or she is already on the planet. They're already here on this planet. So it's a resonance. It's a frequency thing. It's that, you know, like that attraction, that are we resonating at the same frequency? The thing is if things haven't shown up, oftentimes it's because we have, again, these other structures that are playing out where it's like, oh, well, you know, I'm not ready for that person, or I need to do X, Y, and Z. It's like, well, again, going back to the concept of time, I feel I agree with you completely on that. It's just this human construct we've created, and not to say it doesn't serve some sort of purpose, but for me, it's serving less and less of a purpose because I find myself kind of being like, you know, I don't know, especially with like the way that I'm able to run my business and things. It's like, it is a resource in certain situations, but I feel like we are expanding time as we know it, because if we're reverse aging, then like time also isn't really a thing because the clock's not ticking. And there's just so many variables that we're kind of poking some holes in the old narrative. And we're like, oh, well, like if we're conscious creators, we're constantly manifesting, whether it's, well, we're constantly manifesting, it's conscious or unconscious. So how do we want to choose to write the script consciously? And I always like to say this, there's something more expansive because it's like the universe has all kinds of things up its sleeve. And I don't know the vastness of the universe. And so it's like, I made this thing that I think I want might be surface level. Usually it's like 7 layers deeper. And then maybe it's even something different that is like similar resonance, but it's like, oh, I didn't even think of that. And heck yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you point out, because I remember hearing that once and it made sense to me, is that people like poo-poo the idea of like consciously creating your life, like, oh, you can manifest it, but it's literally what we're doing. We live in this reality because we created it unconsciously. Right now we're unconscious creators. So we think we're like, oh shit, we ended up with this. we made it. Like, we just didn't know. So once we shifted into consciousness, we get to consciously create exactly what we want. But we do it slowly, because I remember hearing also once that, like, if you figure it all out, the game's over. You know, it's like, it's kind of
Yeah.
like if you're a little kid and you're like, I don't know, like playing in like a fun house, and you figure out like, oh, this is all just like people, like they're actors, then you're not scared anymore. And you're like, oh man, that's kind of how life works. It's like, once you figure out like the secrets to life, there's no game. So you almost like don't want to end the game. So I feel like that's why we slowly kind of figure things out, but also like we can't figure things out too quickly, because our brain would just explode. You know, I think it takes time to like adjust into this new mindset of what reality is, you know, which again is kind of just all an illusion. But we have to be gentle with it, I think. So yeah, it's just, that's why I think it's just such a fascinating time, because for a long time up until now, we were really just figuring out how to survive as human beings and work together and create community. But then we got this like rise in people having a certain amount of power and all these different things, the masculine energy and the wanting to, you know, have power over others and just like, you know, have victory and stuff like that, success, profit. But now we're coming into like this other state of like, okay, we've done all that. Now, what do we want now? Because none of that really led us to happiness or satisfaction. We don't like the state of things. The systems aren't working. So I think what we see before us is what you and I are so excited about, is these great changes, which we can begin. We might not see in our lifetime. Lifetimes are short right now, but you know, for further generations, we're going to see these changes. So that when I have like, you know, scary times, when I'm in like a dark night of the soul place, I remember this is why I'm here. The growth I'm having now is going to serve me in my next lifetime, which is helping the greater growth of humanity. So that's what like gets me up and keeps going. And I basically decided, it sounds like you have too, Amanda. I think that's why we gravitated together and are having this conversation, is that's all I want to do with this life. That's it. I just want to talk about this and bring it more and more and more to the consciousness of others, that everything can change and we don't have to live this way anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't even know. I feel like we've just gone so many expansive topics. It's just like, I just resonate with your energy so much. So I don't know, maybe we're from the same place, because I actually don't even think a lot of us that have come here are originally from Earth. I don't know. For me, and I felt homesick my entire life. So if any of you listening have felt that way, I don't think that there's a handful of us. If you're listening to this podcast, there's a chance you might not be from here.
Yeah,
so
you're totally not. You're totally not. You've heard of Starseeds, right?
Yeah.
Starseeds, yeah. And I think I'm a Starseed. I think I'm from the Pleiades. I actually have a birthmark that's almost the exact. If you look up the Pleiades on Google, like an image of it, it's like the exact birthmark I have. And I've just always gotten that impression. But that homesickness too. And you know, on my trip, I went through New Mexico and I went to Roswell. And I went to like the Roswell Museum of all the aliens, and like, just for something about it, I just loved the energy there. And when I drove away out of Roswell, I just started sobbing, like just this deep sadness. And I think it's because I'm an alien of sorts. And like, it just hit, I don't remember like being an alien, but just something like, there was like this sense of like, that was more my home. Like that was more my people. And I had to like, let go of it again and go back to this world. And this world is hard. You know, if you listen to any channelers who tap into lives as another species, this planet is so dense that it's exhausting for a soul to be here. And it's in such fear that we're so disconnected from what's true, which is that we are love and always perfect and whole and never harmable. But here we believe we can be harmed, and that's a terrifying place. And that's where we reside now. So people like you and I and everyone listening, I imagine, are a part of the movement towards shifting this and allowing for a new experience on Earth, so that it can be back in the cosmos, hanging out with everybody, not kind of like displaced until we raise our energy up. So
yeah, it's so funny when you were talking about the Pleiades, I got this like feeling that you were from there too. So if that's any confirmation,
it's showing my alienness.
I don't know. There's just something. Yeah, there's something. I don't really feel like I resonate with the Pleiades, but I just haven't, like, I still am not like, I don't necessarily know if that's like, I know I've been there, but I don't know if that's like, I feel like we've been there. Right. And then we have like different origins, but I don't know. Yeah. Initially when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, I could see that. I could feel it.
I love it. Well, thank you for verifying. I feel very connected to it. And I think that other people do as well. So if anyone else resonates with that, you can look up the concept of Starseeds, the Pleiades, I always say it wrong. But I think also keep in mind that this eclipse is like it's an opening right now that's occurring. So you might be getting stronger senses. We're kind of connecting more to our higher selves, to our higher consciousness. So, and it's a eclipse in Taurus, and Taurus is like very tried and true. Like they kind of know what they want and they're going to like make the effort. So it's a more balanced, like stable pursuit of something. So I would just encourage people during this time. Right now we're April 29th. So tomorrow's the 30th when the eclipse occurs, but just notice, like, if you get a sense of something, go with it. If this show resonates with you, seek it out. The eclipse lasts for 6 months. The energy is around for 6 months. So trust yourself a little. You know, all these ideas to someone who's not hip to them might be like, it's way too weird and out there, but if it hits you, why not explore it? You know, because Amanda and I both, there was a time where you didn't think you were like keen to this, like you were in law enforcement.
Yeah. You know? Oh yeah. At the beginning of, gosh, my journey there. That's why I hid in the spiritual closet for many years. Cause like, oh, people are going to think I'm super woo, super weird. But then I got to the point where I'm like, I don't care. I really don't care. Let her rip. Like, doesn't matter. So it's like, when you get to the point to where you're like, just like, so connected to yourself, you like the outside stuff becomes less and less important and your truth becomes more and more important. So if it's like, if there's something that's like pinging, it's like, you can either do your external research or you can close your eyes and like connect with that inner knowingness in yourself and get that confirmation and however you like sense energy too. Cause it's just, you already like, the thing is we already know, it's like just this journey back home. We already know at that deep, deep level. Yeah. We took some sort of potion to forget everything.
Yeah. Amnesia.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's like, we're remembering, like this journey is that remembrance. We're remembering because it's in every cell of our being. It's in like our soul, our higher self, whatever you want to call it, super conscious, like does not forget. Like we're just, but the human part, the density, the stories, it's like, then we forget parts of ourselves. Because again, we're trying to do the best we can here on this dense planet, but then it's like, we can really shift that pain to wisdom and just remember, bring it back to life. And that's, I feel like what this journey really is about. And, it's just, gosh, there's no one size fits all. So, we're all just doing the best we can with the tools we have.
Yeah. Yeah. And very grateful for people like yourself who are speaking to this and doing this work. Much appreciated. And I love this conversation that I'm able to connect with somebody else who feels this same thing and also feels the call to speak, to bring it forward. Cause I don't think everybody does. But I think are some of us that feel that kind of draw towards bringing it into existence, like bringing the spoken word out on these ideas. So excited to be connected with you. Looking forward to more conversations like this. I'll be on your show. You have a podcast as well.
I do. Yeah. It's called New Earth Visionaries. And I completely, so grateful for this connection. And I think you are just an amazing podcast host and just the work you're doing too. It just, it's all of us, right? It's all of us co-creating together. And even those of you listening are just a beautiful piece of the puzzle. So I'm just so grateful to be able to have these conversations. And even, for things like Zoom, like we're able to connect on a Friday afternoon and record this, and it's gonna, reach whoever it's meant to reach. And I just am absolutely so grateful. And I couldn't even imagine this 5 years ago that I'd be doing this. So
I know it's so beautiful. So imagine where we'll be 5 years from now.
Oh, yeah.
Expect the greatest things, expect for great, always anticipate greatness, prepare for greatness. It's coming. Good things. Yes. All right, Amanda, well, where can people find you if they want to work with you? Because you are a healer, you do work with clients. So if people want to work with you, they want to find out more about you, where can they find you?
So you can link up with me for social media. Instagram is primarily where I hang out, just my name, Amanda Monier. And then my website, which is also my name, Amanda Monier. The offering I have right now that is just near and dear to my heart that I recently launched that I'm just filling this container with so much love. It's called the Embodied Essence Community. So I have just, throughout my process, I really found, that I just wanted to make this so accessible for people and to really just meet people where they're at. And I've just found, like, through my journey, I found myself spending so much money on programs and healers. And it was just like another way I gave my power away. So I've just really, really set the intention to just anchor in this beautiful community. We do different conscious creation practices, different meditations, breath work, energy healing. And I just absolutely love it. And I'm launching a program within that group in June. So members of the group get any program that I'm launching is part of the membership, and it's called Radiant. So we're going to tap into the body and really get those. Cause like I mentioned, I found a lot of people asking for this, because it's like, we have these spiritual awarenesses and these expansions. And then the body's like, okay, excuse me, but like, we got to turn the liver back on and we got to balance the hormones. So I am also an energetic allergy healing practitioner. So I'm going to bring some of my trainings and teachings into that container to really work with the nervous system feeling safe in the body, because that's so foundational. As I'm sure you know, working with your clients, it's like, if we don't even feel safe to be here and the nervous system's in fight, flight, or that fear response, it's like, we got to really bring some love and nourishment into that. So that is definitely the offering that is most near and dear to my heart. I have some free meditations on there too. If you feel guided to drop by my website and poke around, there's some free content that is available on there as well. So, or just drop me a DM if you have questions. Like, my door's always open. So
beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. I look forward to being on your show and connecting again next month and in other ways, because we're clearly Starseed sisters. And so it's time for you to maybe check in and see what's coming up for you, because I bet now that we've kind of opened this, you might be getting some messages about your origins.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see if anything comes through on eclipse season. I've definitely felt like I've had some ties to Sirius. I know there's
a lot of people have that.
Yeah. So I definitely feel more connected there, but we'll see what comes through. And I appreciate you so much. And I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited to have you on the show and have further conversations. And thank you everybody for listening today too. I'm so grateful.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Amanda. Take care.